Our project that we did is called the Group Behavior Change Project, where we examined the effects of a token economy on walking behavior in 6 graduate students. So in our presentation, we have, everyone can introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is David Barry. I'm 38. I'm from the state of Rhode Island. This is my first year of the graduate program at Ball State University, and I hope to pursue a PhD.
Hi, my name is Nafisha Gibson. I am 32 in Ohio, and this is my first year, second semester in ABA. I hope to finish with my master's in 2020, May of 2020.
Greetings, my name is Victoria Harris. I hail from the state of Ohio. I actually practice as a clinical mental health therapist at a alternative learning school. And most of the kids on my caseload have a diagnosis of autism, and I want to go back to school to further my education.
Hi, my name is Catherine Inman. I'm 25. I currently work as a behavior analyst in training in Michigan. This is my second year in the program at Ball State, and I plan to graduate this December and then pursue my BCBA.
I am Kaya King. I am 28 years old from New Hampshire. I work as an RBT in a clinic and in-home setting for primarily kids under the age of 5. And I will be done in July with my program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Markowitz. I'm a BC ABA from Washington, D.C., primarily working with kids in-home and sometimes in their schools.
Great, thanks everybody. So for our study, we replicated Krentz, Miltenburger, and Valbuena, 2016. In their study, they used a token economy with individuals who had intellectual disabilities. We decided to replicate their study that they did and see if we could use the same token economy and token reinforcement to increase our walking as well. We used the same ABAB reversal design in the experiment, and we replicated as closely as we could. So each of us walked 50-meter laps during the week, and then we received tokens for every 50-meter lap that we walked. During the intervention phases, 5 of the 6 of us actually showed increases in levels and accelerating trends. So it was really cool to see the differences between our baseline levels and then our intervention levels using the tokens.
Literature review. Physical activity is a very important part of everyone's, in order to maintain both physical health and mental health of everyone. Walsh, Corbett, Hogan, Duggan, and McNamara in 2016 stated that if you have lower physical activity levels, it also increases your risks for specific diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and certain types of cancer. Greenwich, Rosenberg, Newman, and Timpiero of 2011 reported that the increasing trend that he's noticed in terms of sedentary behavior is somewhat portable media devices and video game systems, smartphones and tablets seem to be the cause of that. Next slide. PA levels and effects on the individual. Statistics from the CDC in 2017 reported that individuals between the ages of 18 to 21, they only showed a physical activity level, about 38% of them did. Most people, most within that group weren't very active, and that actually declined severely as the individuals increased in age. Anxiety and depression symptoms per Evans et al. Can actually be minimized through the implementation of increasing your physical activity levels per day. Even mental disorders per Petzold et al. 2017 can actually be minimized. Doherty et al., a recent study from 2019 found within female participants that lower resting cerebral blood flow was correlated pretty strongly with lower fitness levels. And as a result of that, that could actually increase your risks of developing Alzheimer's disease. Who's at increased risk of lower PA levels? Sy et al. 2017 argued that individuals with autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disabilities are found to have far less activity levels in comparison to their typically developing peers. Peterson, Jans, and Lowe in 2008 did a study with approximately 131 adults with intellectual disabilities, and they found that using a pedometer, only about 15% of those individuals actually participated in 10,000 daily steps per day, which is the standard amount recommended. Another study conducted by Stanish et al. 2017, there were two groups that were compared. One was an ASD group. The other group was a typically developing peers group. And both were compared, and in the typical developing peers group, they averaged around 50 minutes per day of physical activity versus the ASD group only averaged around 29 minutes. There were a numerous amount of interventions that were found to help improve PA levels over the last 10 years. The first, I want to review 5 of them, and the 6th one is our replication article. The first one we're talking about is the prompting with group contingency. This was by Hasty, DeMars, Lane, and Wadsworth in 2012. They implemented an alternating treatments design, which consisted of 3 different treatments. The first one was a baseline treatment. The second was a prompt from the teacher. And then the third one was a prompt with a group contingency. They did this study across 15 sessions. Pedometer was utilized to measure the physical activity of students when they left school, and they measured until they went to sleep. Students brought home an index card so that their parents could sign off on their 30 minutes per day of physical activity, and if they completed that, they would also get bonus points towards the intervention. The results of the study indicated that teacher prompting with a group contingency averaged the highest average step count, which was 5,356.2 steps. Baseline only averaged around 2724, and the teacher prompt alone only produced around 2664. Another study that was conducted by Petrie, Barry, and Byrne, which was a lottery system intervention. This was in 2013. He was comparing the PA levels of an older group that was ambulatory care. They all had high blood pressure issues, and the age group was around 55 to 75. And they utilized a lottery reinforcement system to see if they could improve their PA levels. They utilized an experimental design, and both groups were randomized between utilizing baseline data. They alternated between individuals that maintained 4,000 steps and then greater than 4,000 steps, and they alternated those individuals into 2 separate groups. Both groups met. This was done weekly. Each week had a criteria that they had to meet. So the first week was 6,000, the second week was 8,000, and weeks 3 through 12 were 10,000 steps. The control group in the study only received a $5 gift card for turning in their pedometer weekly, whereas the intervention group participated in a lottery system, and basically that consisted of a bowl that contained 500 slips. 209 of those slips had small prize marked on it, so it could have been like stamps or a pen or a lottery ticket. 40 of those ended up being large prizes, so those could have been water or a candy bar or something to that sort. And then there was 1 marked jumbo prize, and that was an iPod. Praise statements were the rest of the slips in that bowl, and there was approximately 250 of them. The lottery system ended up producing the most reinforced in terms of steps. It was 82.5% of the sessions. They reached their goals, whereas the baseline was only 55.3%. And this carried over into a 24-week follow-up where the treatment group still was averaging about 8,000, and then the control group was only averaging around 6,000. Another intervention that was introduced was an incentive program, and this was Schumacher et al. 2013. This was a AB quasi-experimental design, and what they were trying to investigate was whether they could improve employee participation in stair climbing using a very low-cost incentive program. And so what they did was they monitored via security logs 213 adults who accessed the stairs throughout the building. And that's what they used for baseline data. And based on that data, it was across a 6-month period of time, 129 weekdays. They found that the baseline data was only around 5,070 steps on average. And after treatment, which was, let's see, it was around 39,000, with a daily average rose between 39 to 301 The only limitation of this study was the fact that it was an AB design, and so it could not establish a functional relationship. The next intervention was a deposit contract, and this was Washington, McMullen, Devoto in 2016. They introduced an ABA reversal design that analyzed whether a deposit contract would increase the physical activity levels of 19 participants. The participants were separated into two groups, a control group, which was the non-deposit group, and then a treatment group, which was a deposit group. After baseline was done, the participants deposited $25 after first baseline, and if participants met their step criterion each week, they could earn up to $1.50 per day. And if they met their daily totals for 3 consecutive days, they received a bonus of about $2.65. Participants had the potential to earn a maximum of $50 throughout the intervention, and it was found that the intervention increased the daily step total of 14 out of the 19 participants by as much as 2,500 steps per day. The last study that I reviewed was Allstar 2012, which was a token economy. This introduced an alternating treatments design, and it was designed to increase the jump rope behavior of 10 elementary school children. It was 5 boys and 5 girls. 1 child was the control group, whereas the other 9 participated in the reinforcement part of this. Students were randomly paired, and baseline and treatment contained about 5 phases in each. Participants had to jump rope for approximately 30 seconds, and there was 5 cycles of this, and each could rest in between their sets. During treatments, 9 of the partners would reinforce their partners for successful jump roping with tokens, which they could use to turn in for reinforcers such as candy or toys and other such reinforcers at the end of the week. The results of this study show that 3 participants averaged greater than 50 jumps per session. Another 3 increased it to 30 jumps per session. There was one that was 21.80 jumps per session. Another one participant the average was 10 jump per session increase. And then the last one was 10.85 jumps per session. And this comes to our replication article. This is Krentz, Miltenburger, and Valbuena in 2016. The authors utilized an ABA reversal design to demonstrate a functional relationship between increased participant walking, and they did this using a token economy. This was 5 men with varying degrees of intellectual disability, and they wanted to see if they could increase the overall total laps of 50-meter laps that they could walk utilizing the token economy. They utilized a multiple stimulus assessment to do this. It was from De Leon and Iwata, and that's 1996. During baseline, no reinforcers were provided to any of the participants. And during treatment, participants were rewarded with 1 token for every lap that they completed. Participants could take a break at any point during any of the sessions, or they could quit at any point. The results of the study showed that there was an increase in walking behavior when the token economy was introduced.
Thanks, David. So the purpose of our study was to replicate this study that they did in 2016. So we used a single subject researched ABAB reversal design to replicate their study. So we wanted to see if token reinforcement would be effective in increasing our walking as well.
The materials that we used for this study, of course, was ourselves with our walking. We had 6 separate walking locations that were convenient for each of us. We downloaded on our iPhones or Android phones a pedometer app called Acupedia Pedometer app and Map My Walk by Under Armour Pedometer app, which we used every 3rd day when we collected IOA data. Each individual selected a 30-minute time frame in which they could walk if they chose to walk. We did this Monday through Friday for 22 days. There was a preference assessment conducted so that we could select our backup reinforcers. Each one of us selected 5 backup reinforcers. We purchased those with the tokens we earned for walking 50-meter laps. So each 50-meter lap we walked, we received a digital token. We could take that token and spend it, those tokens, and spend it at the end of the walking session, or we could accumulate those for later. The behavioral definition of walking for our replication was physical activity in adults is defined as physically walking 50-meter laps as measured by Acupedia and Map My Walk by Under Armour pedometer apps within a 30-minute time frame to earn a digital token upon completion of each 50-meter lap walked, which can be exchanged for purchase of items. An example of that would be David walked 5 50-meter laps within 30 minutes as indicated by both Acupedia and Map My Walk by Under Armour pedometer apps and received 5 digital tokens. A non-example would be David walked to his car. We used event recording to collect our data, and what I liked about what we did was we used Google Docs to record in spreadsheets. Each one of us had a folder and it had a spreadsheet. It had I do believe a task analysis form that we completed. Every third day when we collected our IOA data. And on top of that, we took pictures, screenshots of our walk, and we uploaded it to the Google Docs in which we each could look at one another's progress. And I thought that was rather important so that we can encourage one another and just see how each other is doing. In addition to that, we charted with our event tracking, the time walk, the laps walk, the number of tokens earned, and what we purchased. And we recorded our data Monday through Friday during those specified times. And this is just a picture of what I talked about, is our spreadsheet. We tracked baseline treatment, and as you can see, it says time walked, numbers of laps walked, number of tokens earned, and reinforcers purchased.
So the participants in our study were 6 individuals. We had 1 male and 5 females. As you saw at the beginning of our presentation, you met everyone and they said how old they were and where they lived. We are all participants in the Advanced Applied Behavior Analysis class at Ball State University's online programs. All the participants in this study live in the Eastern time zone. Beyond that, everyone has very different lifestyles and workloads. Some people are married, some people have children, some people work full-time, and some people work part-time. Additionally, it's important to note that one participant had a medical condition that prolonged her from walking for a long time period, or that hindered her from walking for a prolonged time period. The setting was 30 minutes per weekday, Monday through Friday, at a specified place that each individual chose ahead of time. You can see listed on the slide, everyone chose a different half-hour time slot that worked for their schedule Monday through Friday. And then each person decided if they were going to walk indoors or outdoors. Some people chose to walk in their office buildings or at their gym, or maybe outside in their neighborhood. Here you'll see a table just showing each participant, the location, like where they live, and then where they chose to do their walking data.
As Victoria already explained quickly about the preference assessments, we conducted that using a multiple stimulus without replacement, which the items were set in front of the participants in a straight line, a few centimeters apart. Participants were told to pick one item. Once the item is selected, it is removed, and the remaining items are then rearranged in a new location equal distance apart, and the participant is to pick again. That same pattern continued until all items were picked. If an item was not picked within 30 seconds of being asked to pick an item, an item is removed and is listed as not selected. And here's a list of our backup reinforcers for each participant that we chose based off of the rounds we did.
So our baseline procedures, we all had alarms on our phones that were set up to go off around the specified time that we were set to walk. That would say, would you like to walk today? And we would either choose to complete our walk or not complete our walk. We would walk for 30 minutes or until we decided we were done, and we were also allowed to take breaks if needed. We would use the Acupedo pedometer app for every day, and then on IOA days, we also use the Map My Walk app by Under Armour. The most important thing about the baseline procedures is that no reinforcement was given, so we did not earn any digital tokens for walking during our baseline days. At the end of the sessions, we continued to track the amount of laps that we walked, even though we were not going to earn any of the tokens. So our intervention phases were the only thing that was really different about them between the baseline and the intervention was that we were earning the digital tokens. So at the end of the walking sessions, the participants would calculate the number of digital tokens they earned, and they could either exchange the tokens for an item on their reinforcer menu, or we could let them accumulate. And as time went on, the more that we accumulated, we could use to buy one of the bigger reinforcers that we had chosen.
Catherine, can you please go to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
For our IOA data, we used the Map My Walk, which was collected by all participants of the study. It was collected about 20% of each session phase. While the participants walked, we had both the Acupedo app and the Map My Walk app open, and it recorded the distance walked. And then at the end of the walk, both apps were stopped, and then we measured and compared, not so much measured, but compared the accuracy of the times.
So to ensure treatment integrity, we created a task analysis. The task analysis contained each of the steps that we needed to follow each day to make sure that we were all following the same intervention and all doing the same things every day. So I created the task analysis from a lecture I went to last year where they talked about the importance of treatment fidelity and integrity and making sure that everyone's on the same page. So I took every single step that we had and I broke it down into a task analysis. As we stated before, every third session, so when we were doing IOA data, we would complete the task analysis along with collecting the IOA data. So this is our task analysis, and it basically broke down what we needed to do into simple steps. We would record if we did it or if we did not, and then we would calculate the percentage of just the percentage followed correctly. If this fell below 100%, we would talk about it. I'm pretty sure we all stayed pretty good on getting this done and following all the steps since we had the task analysis. So this was a really handy way to make sure we had treatment integrity in our replication.
So the next 6 slides are all of our individual graphs. We're all going to talk about our own graphs because we know how we walked the best and we all know the details. So the first graph belongs to Kaya, which is me. I have 2 dips in my graph where I did not get a chance to walk. I do have 3 children and it has been a long winter with sickness, so that unfortunately caused a few dips. I did average about 27 minutes of walking per session with a range of 24 to 43 minutes throughout the entire study. The initial baseline average for laps walked was 38.5 with a range of 0 to 54. My baseline increased in that I averaged 58 laps walked per session with a range of 52 to 69. My initial treatment phase ranged from 0 to 51 with an average of 38 laps walked per session. When we returned back to the treatment, I ranged from 42 to 57 and averaged about 51 laps per session. There was an increase in data during treatment phases that resulted in an average of 13 additional laps walked per session in the second treatment phase. With all the averages and the ranges showing, my graph has an increasing trend line for laps walked.
All right. So for my walking data, the data in the initial baseline was level, but also quite variable. I was averaging about 55 laps per session during baseline. That increased during the initial treatment phase up to 64 laps per session, where I was doing about 30 minutes walking per day. You'd see there's 2 dips on day 9 and day 10 due to inclement weather. There was quite a lot of snow, and I decided not to walk. During the second baseline of my walking data, there was a clear decelerating trend. The average was 34 laps per day. It had started at 52 and then decreased all the way to 25. During the final phase of treatment, it increased again to 49 laps per session. So there was an increase from the second baseline, although it was about the same as the first baseline. And again, on day 22, there was inclement weather, so I was unable to complete any walking. Besides the decreasing trend in the second baseline, my data was pretty level during most other phases.
Okay, this is Victoria speaking. I actually am the individual participant that has a hip problem. I have to get a total hip replacement. So my first baseline, I walked an average of 27.75 laps. My range was 24 to 33 laps, and I basically walked about 15 minutes, but my speed in which I walked was a lot slower because I couldn't walk as fast. I had to take my time. I walked backwards. I walked sideways, depending on how I felt comfortable. I'm in physical therapy, so I walked various different ways. So that was my baseline. With the token reinforcement, I just took off walking. I said, let me try this. And I took off walking, and my average laps walked was 32 with a range of 0 laps walked to 42, because on the 5th day of this first reinforcement, I couldn't walk at all. I was in a lot of pain. So in the second baseline, I took a large dip, then it began to accelerate. I walked approximately 26 or 27 laps. And then in my final phase, my walking fluctuated. It actually then began to take an upward increase. So it had an increasing trend going up in the end. But in spite of the one dip and the fluctuating days during both treatment phases, my walking was pretty stable.
Okay, so I'm Catherine. This is my graph. So for baseline, first baseline, I had a pretty stable baseline with low, medium levels. My average laps walked was about 22 laps. My range was 20 to 30 laps. I walked about 22 minutes a day. And then in my first intervention, there's a dip. That was when there was a lot of snow outside and I didn't have time to go out and walk. But I definitely had an accelerating trend that I noticed between the baseline and the token reinforcement of the first phases. The levels also increased. I averaged about 26 laps or 50-meter laps in the first intervention phase. This was because I had that 0 day, so it kind of decreased it a little bit. But on average, I was around 30, 35 laps. During the second baseline, I went back down to the same level as the first baseline, very stable data. And then for the third or the fourth final phase, the last token reinforcement, I had 3 dips. That was when the weather was bad or I had scheduling conflicts where I couldn't walk that day. But there is an immediate increase in level, and also the data is accelerating in trend. I also noticed that this is when the weather started to get a little bit warmer, so I was actually more excited to go outside and walk and actually earn tokens because I could stay out for longer. But overall, in my data, there is an accelerating trend, and levels increased pretty noticeably from baseline to intervention phases, especially between the second baseline and the second intervention phase.
Okay, this next graph is my Nafisha. I started off my baseline really strong, walking with an average of 30 laps, ranging from 15 and 40 laps per session. I did dip twice in my initial treatment phase due to some work and personal emergencies that I had. However, I was able to average a total of 23 laps, ranging from 0 to 44 laps per session. My walk continued to increase, creating a functional relation during the entire baseline and treatment. About for sorry, for the entire study, I would say that I walked average about 22 minutes per session, ranging from 15 to 31 laps. Yeah, that's about it.
Next graph is mine. It's David. During first baseline phase, I averaged 26.8 laps per session with a range of 21 to 33 laps per session. Freezing temperatures made it especially difficult to get accurate baseline data. You notice how it dipped on sessions 1, 2, and 5. Time walked was significantly hindered due to unforeseen weather conditions being cut short in sessions 1, 2, and 5. During the first treatment phase, sessions 7 and 9 resulted in 0 laps walked due to being snowed in. My driveway was completely covered in the parking lot where my apartment is, so I had no place to walk. And then during 10, 11, and 12 were conducted in freezing temperatures, and as a result of that, I had to cut those also short. And when that happened, you could see how it dipped and then accelerated up, and the level went upward. And let's see. So as the first treatment phase was extended to establish a more accurate and stable trend, the mean average steps walked were 30.3 laps per session with a range of 0 to 46 laps per session. In the second baseline phase, a stable trend was established across 5 sessions, averaging 33.6 laps per session. During the second treatment phase, session 23 was cut short due to inclement weather, resulting in a sharp drop in level. However, the next 4 treatment sessions resulted in a sharp rise in level, and a stable trend was established across 4 data points. The average of 44.3 laps per session were walked in the second treatment phase, and the range was between 18 to 51 laps per session. An increase of 3.5 laps was established between initial baseline and treatment phases. However, because the second baseline treatment phase, the average lap total increased approximately 10.7 laps, there was a 14 lap difference between treatment phase 1 and treatment phase 2, and a 6.8 lap increase between baseline conditions.
So all of the participants experienced an increase in baseline to their intervention, except for one. So Heather's trend could be due to a not strong enough reinforcer. So a preference assessment should be conducted if the study were to continue longer, just to determine if her reinforcers have changed or not, or if they're still the same, or if there's anything else that can be done to help. Individual laps walked averaged differently for each participant, depending on the physical ability, time, and obviously weather is a big issue for us here in the Eastern time zone. It's winter and there's a lot of snow. But we did have a total range of 0 to 70 for all participants.
Heather, you're muted.
Goodness, sorry guys, thanks for that, Nafisha. I was so excited to tell you all about the limitations. So there's several limitations of this replication study. The first have to do with the setting. The first setting limitation is the weather. So many people have already talked about during their results section that weather was a huge confounding variable. Oftentimes it was very snowy or rainy or just extremely cold and windy. So people would either choose not to walk, or if they did choose to walk, they would not walk as far as they might have if the weather had been more pleasant. The next setting limitation is for those who were walking in a city, having to use crosswalks or wait at traffic lights at major intersections. That also might have impacted the distance that they walked. The last limitation that has to do with the settings was that even though at the beginning of our study, everyone chose a 30-minute window that they were going to be able to walk every single day, Monday through Friday, it was not always possible to walk at the exact same time, potentially either due to weather or just conflicts with work or personal things. So walking at different times of day also might have affected the distance that everybody was able to walk. The next group of limitations I'll talk about are the reinforcers themselves. In our study, the reinforcers came at a personal cost. This is both financial, because of course we're paying for our own reinforcers, but also the time and energy of seeking out the reinforcers, making sure we have them at the store, or if it's a sort of, activity, making sure that you have all the necessary things to go on that activity, the time and everything. The next limitation that has to do with reinforcers is that in our study we had no way to monitor the delivery or the access to reinforcers. So in the original study, participants were unable to access their reinforcers Monday through Friday while at their center, outside of being able to earn them and trade in their tokens for those backup reinforcers. In our case, there was no one to make sure that we weren't accessing those, treats or anything like that, if we hadn't earned those tokens. On the other hand, just because we wrote down on our sheet that we had traded in our tokens for a particular backup reinforcer, there was really no way to monitor that someone had actually gone out and bought that reinforcer or delivered it to themselves. The last one, which Kaya had already mentioned in the results, is that all the items chosen during the preference assessment may not have been reinforcing for walking behavior specifically. And in that case, if the study had gone on longer, perhaps a new preference assessment could have been done. All right, the last limitations are the next one has to do with measurement. While we were taking data on 2 different pedometer apps, to ensure accuracy, one thing that we found was that oftentimes the 2 apps actually were not giving us the same distance walked. So we were realizing that the accuracy of our measurement might not have been very good. And of course, that would certainly be a limitation of our study, since we're measuring walking and we're not sure if our measurements were always accurate. The last limitations have to do with the physical capabilities and the fitness level of each participant. As Victoria had already mentioned, there were some injuries going into the walking experiment, which would certainly impact how far participants were wanting to walk, as well as just general fitness level. And maybe for some participants, walking was inherently more reinforcing than for others.
So despite many limitations in the study, obviously there seems to be a lot, the token economy did provide some reinforcement for the individuals to continue walking and to gain more points. Results from the current study, they add continued support to the pre-existing data, stating that token economies are useful in increasing positive behavior. Future studies calculating the total amount of meters walked would benefit from a physical pedometer that tracks meters. So we discussed how we struggled with one of our apps not collecting as accurate data that we had hoped. So using a physical pedometer would have been a better choice. However, with the amount of money that we had already spent on all of our reinforcers, to have all of us purchase a physical pedometer would not have been useful, and probably would have added more stress to it. Token economies would benefit from future research involving individuals with specific disabilities such as autism, and would also benefit from age-related studies. Research in which age group is more likely to see results from a token economy, or is it similar across all boards? So are 60-year-olds going to experience the same results as 10-year-olds? Research could also benefit from the reinforcers used. So the price per reinforcer varied among participants, and research would benefit using a set price. So for some of us, all of our reinforcers had a specific token level, so 25, 50, 75, 100, and 125. For each of us, though, each level would cost differently. So your 25-point level may cost 50 cents, it may cost $1, and everybody's varied. So somebody is 125-point level may be $50 or it may be $125. So everybody's level's different, and so possibly adding a set price to each level may affect how future research could also be done. The next 4 slides are all of our references, and this concludes our presentation.